Yeah. So to me, technology mindfulness means using technology in a way that serves you well or makes your life easier, and not using it in a way that's harmful to you or makes you feel enslaved to it. There was many days, this was after I became an entrepreneur. So I had much more autonomy and much less structure in my days. And I would, be working at home, and I would, do a bunch of stuff and check emails and all these things. And I felt super busy, right? But then at the end of the day, I would ask myself really frequently, well, if I had to write down a list of everything that I actually accomplished today, what would be on that list? And the answer was not very much. Any kind of screen time use, even TV use before the age of 5, can contribute to the incidence of autism, especially in males. So I really believe that the amount of love, success, and happiness in this world are infinite. And so imagine how much love, success, and happiness we could all have together if we all decided to put humans first.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I am the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. No matter what we do today, technology surrounds us. As we get deeper and deeper into the Internet of Things sphere, we can find ourselves getting lost in a multitude of apps and programs, all geared towards making us more efficient. But is it really? Well, today my guest is going to unpack a framework that he calls technology mindfulness and how we can change our work lives into a 4-day work week. And before we get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform so you can stay updated on the latest content while helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. Let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
So I just want to ask you a couple of questions, guys. How do you use your technology to make your tasks more efficient? And do you actually have a framework for ensuring that it's doing just that? To me, I wonder if we put that much thought into it. And I know I didn't, and I don't do that very, very often or at all, really. And it's kind of like a zombie time, isn't it? We sit with these apps and it's just click through here, all the applications. And, with my fidgety habits, it's not hard for me to blow away an hour or 2 hours just clicking through without making much progress in the work that I'm actually trying to get done. I don't know for you if that sounds familiar or not. And even if it doesn't, you know what? Great, good for you. I'm really grateful for you. But if it does, I really want you to listen to today's episode, because today my guest is Rob Kracek. And Rob is a thrill seeker, a self-professed nerd, question asker, voracious reader, competitor, and keynote speaker and business builder. And when he first got his first Wall Street job to sell a side equity and analyst out of college, he thought he'd made it. And after buying everything he ever wanted on his wish list, good for you, buddy, he realized that he still wasn't happy. Isn't that so true for all of us, eh? He listened deep down to a desire to find more, to help more people by leaving this finance area to eventually owning 3 Anytime Fitness health clubs. Hey, I'm a member of one, and 4 uBreakiFix cell phone repair stores. So truly an entrepreneur at spirit. But as someone vulnerable to technology's addictive hold, especially at a young age, video games and Facebook in particular, Rob is now on a mission to help individuals and companies reduce the burnout and get back time to master their careers and their lives. And so he's founded the Humans First website to provide a one-of-a-kind coaching experience that analyzes and coaches people's efficiency and energy by paying attention to their mindfulness through technology. Well, welcome to the show, Rob. How are things today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Alan. Really grateful to be here and really excited to talk to you and the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the idea of this combination of technology and mindfulness. But I always like to start my podcast by asking my guests about being on a hero's quest. It's something that we speak a lot in the Awakened Man program. And as you know, the hero's quest or the hero's journey is all about the trials and tribulations that we're facing and as we go through life. And so tell us a little bit about some of those and how they shaped you and what you did to overcome them, and how that's paved the way to who you are today.
Yeah, certainly happy to share that with you. And I really think that this part of my history and my journey is a huge factor in where I am today and why I want to help people with technology mindfulness and the 4-day work week. So when I was a kid, and I had no, no conception that this was happening, but when I was a kid, I actually think that I was pretty anxious, and that led me to see the world a lot differently than I do today. But I also was bullied a lot on the school bus because my school bus driver was elderly, and he was at the end of his career, and he literally gave no cares about what was happening on the bus. So kids would take my jacket and smear it on the ground in winter when it was all muddy. And one kid lit my hair on fire, and kids would regularly, get in fights on the bus and bully people. And so, but my dad, he was a high school vice principal. And so, as a principal, you kind of tell your kid, hey, you don't fight back. You just, you kind of try to avoid those situations. But and I totally understand why he did that, but that kind of led me to feel helpless in some situations, which was really tough for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then another thing that happened during my my childhood, which made life very difficult, was when I entered high school, I developed extremely bad and crippling acne, and it was a really tough time for me because it led to me having low self-esteem, low self-worth. It was very difficult for me to connect with people, and I didn't even want to look people in the eye. And 1 year for my yearbook picture, I purposefully didn't go to my picture and get it taken because I didn't want people to remember my face that way. And so one of the other unfortunate side effects of me having this acne was that I actually became addicted to video games because the family computer was in my bedroom. But this was in the mid 90s, well before most people even had a cell phone or an internet connected computer. And so I saw very early, compared to most people in their lifetime, especially at that point in time, how technology could have a negative impact on my life. And so that's why this is a very personal issue for me. And I really want to help people with this because there's other points in my life where I was also addicted to Facebook and addicted to email. And so I've been addicted to a lot of different stuff from technology. And I want to help humanity avoid those things that I went through.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great story there. And it's so true for a lot of us, right? That, our childhood wasn't necessarily the greatest growing up. And so the different scenarios that we get put in really ends up by shaping who we are. And at the time when you started to recognize that this technology was there, it was an opportunity for you to, really get away from that pain that you were going through, but you were able to recognize that how much damage it could do. So tell us, what does technology mindfulness mean? And then how do we practice that?
Yeah. So to me, technology mindfulness means using technology in a way that serves you well or makes your life easier, and not using it in a way that's harmful to you or makes you feel enslaved to it. And so there's so many things. I mean, we could literally talk for many hours about the ways that people could employ technology mindfulness. But the first thing to me is to be aware of how much a role technology plays in our life. Because if you have awareness, then you can start to notice those things, and that allows you to change your behavior. And so I can give you a statistic, and I love analyzing things. I love data and statistics. So I'll probably have a lot for you guys today. But the entire reason why I named my company Humans First is because in America, and this, by the way, statistic is from before COVID. So you can't say that COVID influenced this. Before COVID, the average American spent 12 hours and 21 minutes a day in front of screens and media.
Wow.
In other words, we are spending 3/4 of our waking lives, 7 days a week, in front of screens and media. And that's just not how humanity was designed to be. Screens aren't in nature. They're not natural. And so if we're spending 3/4 of our waking lives in front of those things, there's bound to be some negative repercussions that we probably aren't even thinking about or aren't aware of. And so the name of my company, Humans First, is a reminder to everyone that the most joy and happiness and purpose and meaning in our lives comes from putting humans first and not technology first.
Well, man, I just love that. And so that's such an incredible stat there, 12 hours before. And when you think, excuse me, when I stop to think about that, that's probably right bang on for me, right? And all of us think about our lives now, everything, if it's not a spreadsheet or a Word document or something, we're sitting in front of a screen, and then we get done that. And what are we doing? We're sitting down and looking at our phones, or we're going to watch the TV, whatever. It's just a screen, constantly and bombarding us. And then we make these apps are all built to really be addictive for us. it's kind of funny, but this month with the Band of Brothers, my men's work is that our book of the month is Indistractable.
Yes. By Neil
right?
Eyal.
Yeah, Neil Eyal. Of course, he wrote
Oh.
Hooked, right? So he's writing now the second half of, hey, he realized that all these companies took what he had to say with Hooked and developed all this technology. Now he's trying to help people, pull away from that. And so I thought this was so perfect for us to have this conversation today about that separation and how we use that technology to become more focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can share another little piece of information about myself that I think will resonate with listeners. So the reason that I feel like I had a personal need for technology mindfulness was there was many days. This was after I became an entrepreneur, so I had much more autonomy and much less structure in my days, and I would be working at home, and I would do a bunch of stuff and check emails and all these things. And I felt super busy, right? But then at the end of the day, I would ask myself really frequently, well, if I had to write down a list of everything that I actually accomplished today, what would be on that list? And the answer was not very much. And I was sitting here going, what the heck is happening? Like, I've read all the books, like I read the book 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, all these productivity books. And I thought I was so productive, but then I was really objective with myself. And I'm like, I'm actually not that productive. And so, and one of the main contributors to that for me personally is that I have ADHD, right? And so I'm much more easily distracted than the average person. And so over the last 4 years, I read over 100 books and dissected over 2,000 articles and studies and ran many, many hundreds of experiments on myself to understand the ways that I could use technology in a positive way to kind of give me some digital bumpers so that it would actually help me focus and help me do my job and grow my businesses. And that is the result of what I'm sharing with you guys today.
That's outstanding. Outstanding. No kidding, right? And just because of that learning, right, you were able to come up with a framework that I would really like for us to spend time with. So tell me what is so concerning about how we use technology today. Is it because people bought everything that was in the book Hooked? But what is it that's really so concerning about the use of it today?
Yeah. So and again, this conclusion took me like 3.5 years to come to, right? So this is after just putting together so many different pieces of so many books. And here's the kind of the way that I would describe what's happening to the average person, right? So many times when we interact with technology, whether it's checking our email, checking Slack, getting a notification on our phone, here's what happens psychologically and physiologically. Let's say, for instance, we check our email, and what happens is this activates our sympathetic nervous system. This is our fight or flight system that keeps us alive. And generally, that is helpful, and it does help us survive in a scenario where there is truly a threat, as if, for instance, if there was a saber-toothed tiger attacking our family, 50,000 years ago, this sympathetic nervous system gets activated because we either need to fight the saber-toothed tiger or run away to stay alive. Right. But when that system is constantly activated, that is really, really detrimental to our mental health and our physical health, because what happens is adrenaline and cortisol are released during that process. And if there's too much adrenaline and cortisol built up, it actually degrades our ability to not only sleep, but also function and think well and make good decisions and all kinds of things. And so when you activate the sympathetic nervous system, our body needs a minimum of 30 minutes to downregulate and recover and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, the statistics are the average white collar worker checks their Slack and email inboxes once every 6 minutes, and we get a smartphone notification once every 15 minutes. And so if you're doing the math, we're getting interrupted by technology way more frequently than once every 30 minutes. And so what's happening to the average person is their sympathetic nervous system is just getting amped up the entire day because we don't have time to recover. And that, I truly believe, is the root cause of not all, but a lot of the stress and anxiety that people are feeling today in the entire world, in the entire internet connected world.
Yeah, that is so true. I just love how you were able to tie that together, because it makes so much sense that if the sympathetic nervous system is on go, all day long, 8-10 hours a day
or more,
or more, right? Or more. I'm not one of those that takes my my phone with me to into the bedroom, but I do have my
Nice.
e-reader, and so it's
Mhm.
one of the part of that the evening routine. It's not all I think about it, but if we're always in go mode, we never
Mhm.
get a chance to settle down. And so, what would be then you recognize this now? So what was your big aha moment then that allowed you to make a change and shift in how you were doing things and how you were approaching stuff?
Yeah, so I can kind of explain to you the story about how I realized that technology mindfulness is really what the world needs. So I was in one of my cell phone repair stores, checking people in like I'd done, thousands of times. And so this middle-aged woman came in with her son, and I would just guess that her son was maybe 15 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so she's physically pushing her son up to the front counter, and she said, "Hey, Tyler, you need to describe to this man what happened to your phone." And he had broken his phone. And so the kid looked at me, and I just felt so terrible for him because he couldn't look me in the eye. He couldn't stammer out a sentence, right? And he just had very poor body posture. And, he really struggled to communicate with me. And, I thought maybe he had a learning disability or something, but I did my very best to help him. And we fixed his phone, and everything else went fine. And, they left the store. So I started though paying attention, and a couple weeks later, a version of this scenario happened again with a different woman and her daughter. And so they came in, the daughter couldn't really communicate with me, even though she was probably a middle-aged teenager. And then I had my aha moment. I thought to myself, well, these kids are coming in here and they're probably heavy users of technology because they need to get their device fixed right away when it breaks. And maybe it's because of how much they use technology that this is why they can't hold a conversation. This is why they're not self-confident. The technology use is the cause of why they're like that. And so I started seeing that more and more. This same scenario just kept repeating itself over and over and over. And I read this book called iGen by Gene Twenge, and it absolutely showed me that there's an entire generation of kids that is their whole life, everything is being dramatically changed by technology. And of course, that's just part of the equation. Adults' lives are being changed too, but for kids, it's even more extreme because they're even more sucked into and addicted to their technology.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's so true because I can remember, my kids are in their or just getting into their 30s now. And when they were little, they didn't have the kind of technology obviously we have today.
Right.
But boy, in trying to take care of them, when dad had to look after them, it was okay, put on the favorite Disney movie and, give me just give me a half hour, 40 minutes of peace and quiet. But today it's just totally pervasive. They're sitting, I see kids as, toddlers with a phone, an old phone in their hands. And it makes me wonder the path that we're leading this next generation, future generations with this type of technology.
Well, and another thing that people don't realize, and this is actually slightly harder to prove, but I truly believe it is happening. There is now some evidence that especially any kind of screen time use, even TV use before the age of 5 can contribute to the incidence of autism, especially in males. And the thought process is that when you're born, you have 3 times the amount of brain connections that you do when you're older. And those brain connections get pruned away to save energy as you get older, right? Well, when you look at a screen, it's very similar to the things in nature that we pay most attention to, which are things that are bright, things that are moving, and things that are loud. All 3 of those things describe what a screen is. And so there's this very captivating stimulus when we look at a screen when we're very young, and that tells your brain, oh, that's important. You should pay attention to that. And so your brain kind of gets wired to pay more attention to screens and then pay less attention to other things like facial expressions. And that's what potentially causes or contributes to autism, because kids with autism cannot read facial expressions that well. And it's probably because their brain is more attuned to things like screens.
Totally true. That makes a lot of sense because yes, they're not able to, their brains haven't been able to recognize facial expressions and to be able to discern between what this means and what that means, because everything is animated on the screen or it's in a totally out of context, right?
Exactly. So like for instance, when a kid is watching a TV, let's even just say a TV screen,
yeah,
when the actor makes a facial expression, the kid doesn't know that that person on the TV screen isn't in conversation with them. And so it actually confuses their ability to discern facial expressions because they don't have the context of what's going on. They just see that it's a thing that looks like a person, and that person isn't reacting to me like a real human would in front of them. And it's very confusing, even though it doesn't seem like it would be.
Yeah. Well, it makes total sense, especially at that age. So now I know we're focusing a bit on the downfall of it, but I wanted to just shift a little bit and talk about what would be the easiest thing for people to do that they could do differently with the technology, because there's no way around it. We're going to deal with technology. We're doing that in this very moment. Mm-hmm. But what's the easiest thing they could do differently that would allow them to be more productive at home and at work?
Yeah, I mean, easiest, I guess, is different for different people, because here's something that you could do in literally 30 seconds, and it will completely change your life and save you an average of 2 hours and 14 minutes a day. But a lot of people don't want to do it. And so it is delete social media completely from your phone. Now, instead of using it from your phone, you could still use it, let's say, from a laptop or a desktop computer. You don't have to get rid of your accounts. It just makes it less convenient for you to use social media. And when you use it on your computer or laptop, then you have to be more deliberate and intentional about your use. And it will obviously dramatically cut down the amount of time you spend on it. But I've had hour-long conversations with people about that, and they won't do it. And I've also had 60-second conversations with people, and they do it. So it sort of, depends on the person. But I guess one other thing that I just want to bring some general awareness to people about, which I think is so important. If you are doing anything, we'll say, quote, productive or work-related on your phone, let's say you do that 2 hours a day. Well, because your screen is way smaller on your phone and it takes you way longer to type with your fingers than it does on a keyboard, the average person is about twice as productive on a computer as they are on a phone. And so if you think about it, then anything that you can do on your phone, but you could do it on a computer, it really, really, really is to your benefit to do that thing on the computer, because it literally takes you half the time. And so what you have to realize is when you're using your phone for work-related stuff, you are trading convenience for productivity. It is way more convenient, there's no question, but it is way less productive. And so you have to ask yourself, do I want that productivity, or do I want the convenience? But you can't get both on a phone. It doesn't work like that.
That makes so much sense. And you're absolutely right. I was just thinking my own experience that, one of the things is I'm learning to use Instagram and the stories part of it. And it's just a pain in the rear end to try to figure this thing out on the phone. And I keep saying, man, I got to figure out how to get this thing on my laptop or my desktop, because I know I'm way more productive. I can bang that out a lot quicker. And because I haven't figured that out, it's not something that I've dived into too much, because I'm just not interested in diving that deep into another piece of technology. I wanted to shift a little bit though and get into and start to talk a little bit about this 4-day work week concept that you've come up with. And so how is it possible for companies then, because I know you deal with businesses, so let's start with companies. How is it possible for a company to transition their business into a 4-day work week?
Yeah, absolutely. And this does take a little bit of out of the box thinking, right? Like, obviously you have to do different things in order to make this work, but it is so possible. The two main concerns people have when I talk to them, or companies have, right, are the following. The first one is, well, how on earth can I get 5 days of work done in 4 days, right? And then the second one is, how can I, take care of scheduling or coverage concerns? Because if my clients want me there for 5 days a week, but my employees work 4 days a week, well, how can I make that work? And so I can just kind of address both of those and help them, help people understand a little bit more how this definitely is possible. So I'll take the second one first. So basically, let's pretend you need client coverage for 5 days, but you only want the employees to work 4 days. Well, here's what you could do. Let's say you have a team of 10 people. You would divide them into two groups. Group 1 works Monday through Thursday. Group 2 works Tuesday through Friday. And so that way you do get adequate coverage, and, everyone still works 4 days per week, or, some variation of that, right? So that is relatively straightforward for most companies and not a big deal. But the second one is, well, how do you, do 5 days of work in 4 days? And I'll just give you an example that I have of a client, an individual client of mine. Her name is Heidi, and she actually, I'm really excited for her. She's running for governor of Colorado. So she's super busy, right? Like busy politician, a million things going on with her campaign. And so she came to me and she's like, I'm just so burned out. I can't, I don't have enough hours in a day. So I gave her this initial client survey that I give all my clients. And then I worked with her for just 2 hours, and she was super, super open-minded and basically took every single suggestion I had. And we measured her screen time on her phone with the screen time app. So it's a very objective measure. You can't game it. It's built into the operating system. We measured it before my interventions and then afterward. And what we found is that she actually saved over 40 hours of screen time per week.
Wow.
By doing all these different things, a whole work week's worth of time every week. Now, obviously, that's not possible for every single person, but if I can help someone save a work week worth of time every week, I'm very confident that I can save the average person a day per week. And it's really just the summation of all these small things that you're probably doing many, many times a day, like checking your email unnecessarily, that add up to an immense amount of time in a week. And you just don't even realize it. It's not even on our radar that this is happening, but it really is happening for almost every person who works a white collar job.
100%. And that's exactly what I was saying, alluding to in my intro monologue, talking about how easy it is for me. I've got a couple of screens going, everybody, excuse me, I have a couple of screens going, I'm working on different files. And next thing you know, I'm just finding myself, I'm just clicking through them back and forth, and I'm really not accomplishing a lot. Yeah. As opposed to really diving into the business. And really what you're saying, and I'm so glad that you were able to take that from a company to an individual, because that's where I was wondering as well. How do you help the solopreneur or the entrepreneur or the individual who's going into work? Because really what you're suggesting is trying to find 20% of their time, reclaim 20% of their time, because that's really from 5 days to 4 days. You're looking to find that. And just, it sounds like even that's as simple as using the device app that says how much time you spent on it, is a big change, right?
Oh, totally. And I like using the screen time app on the phone just because it's a very objective measure, right? I'm not measuring it. The phone is measuring it. But here's the thing. Another statistic for the listeners is the average white collar worker sends and receives 126 emails per day. Well, if you take just 2 minutes per email on average to process it, that means that just email alone is literally half of your day, almost exactly 4 hours. And then if you add, let's say 2 hours of meetings on there, that's 3/4 of your day. And which means that you only have 2 hours to do your actual job, like to do the thing, like the activities related to projects and the other task specific stuff for your job. And so that's totally insane for most people. Like you can't do your job in 2 hours. And so if you think about it this way, if I can even just help you not eliminate email, but let's say cut your email in half, that right there is over 1 day of work per week, every single week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just thinking of a colleague of mine. He works for a large organization. And one of the things that they recognized in their organization was that the use of email was getting so bad and such time waster that they actually sent out a directive to stop responding with thank you emails.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Because everyone, hey, great. I know everyone's trying to be polite. We're really polite here. I'm in Canada, so we're all always really polite. But everyone understands it, or that's implied that it's a thank you that you did something. But what it did was that it would force people to read another email, and it wouldn't be one thank you. It would be, most people are sending a global. So depending on how large that distribution list is, it could be 50 thank yous. Well, they save so much time, from just that simple process of, okay, we don't need to send a thank you email for doing our jobs, basically.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that, Alan, because one of the things that I see with the vast majority of companies that I work with is the following. Almost no company has established written guidelines or boundaries for communication. And so the huge problem with that is if there's no official document that's sent out in writing, then what employees are forced to do is guess where and when and how much to communicate. And if they're just guessing, obviously people are guessing different things, right? So everyone has a different expectation. And so what does that do? This creates an insane amount of totally unnecessary stress for people, because everyone in the company is, wondering, oh, do I reply to the boss's email at 8 p.m.? Is that expected? Is it not? If I do that, does that show them that I'm working at 8 p.m.? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I mean, there's just so much more uncertainty, which creates stress. And then again, activates your sympathetic nervous system and doesn't allow you to do your job. And so what I've found is that if you clearly communicate standards of communication and guidelines, then, and everyone at the company agrees to it, then people don't have to check their email once every 6 minutes. They can check it maybe a couple times a day and still be well within the guidelines. And then they can block off time in their calendar to not be distracted and do high quality work.
100%. I completely, completely agree with that. And that is a pervasive issue with many companies, is that there isn't really any framework for how to use email or technology in terms of when are we on, and when are we off? Like there are certain positions that are going to be on call. That's a given, but not necessarily everybody. I also want to move away now. We've talked a little bit about individuals, and we've talked a little bit about companies, but now we're really to talk about how this technology is impacting relationships and all kinds of relationships, and what your information is finding today about that.
Yeah, and this to me is, this is really this is like the main reason that I created Humans First. Is what I'm seeing happening is we are spending so much time with technology and so little time with other people that I legitimately think it is eroding the fabric of society across the world, seriously. And I don't mean to say, and by the way, I should have said this in the beginning. I'm not anti-technology. I'm a nerd. I built my first computer in middle school. So I love technology, but kind of what I say is I'm not anti-technology. I'm pro-humanity.
Yeah.
And a couple statistics for you. And I almost didn't believe that these were true. I really looked carefully into the source. But a couple of statistics are, in 2020, the most searched for fear on Google was a fear of other people. And the thing that we should want to do the most is be with other people, is now the thing that we fear the most. And then another statistic, which was even to me sadder, is that the average American has not made a friend in the last 5 years. How is that even possible? And again, that was pre-COVID. That didn't include COVID, right? That wasn't so, the sense of closeness and relationships and cohesion and connection with people is not here anymore. It's not what it used to be. And, I've kind of played around with the tagline for my company as being restoring human connection, because that's really what I hope people do. Is if they just listen to this podcast and think a little bit differently and think to themselves, hey, you know what, even if here's kind of my challenge to listeners, right? The average American is on social media 2 hours and 14 minutes a day. Here would be my challenge to you. What would happen if you did this? What would happen if you just cut that time in half? I'm not saying don't use social media. You just cut that time in half and took that hour and 7 minutes that you have per day and spent that with people that you care about in your life, like your spouse, your children, your good friends, or even just call people and talk to people that you haven't seen or heard from in a while and rekindle some relationships. How much better would your life be if you did that? I think it would be infinitely better than it is now. And I just think that people aren't even thinking about doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally true. And it reminds me of the story in Indistractable, where Nir talks about sitting with his daughter, and he's done everything pretty much right. He's booked time with his daughter. It's just going to be him and her. They're going to do something, but lo and behold, he's sitting there on his phone, and so he's not paying attention. And so that's exactly what you're saying. Is just, what if we just drop that, cut that in half, and truly left the phone aside or left the technology aside to allow us to spend time to gain that connection? Because I really think, if anything, I think people were pretty excited about how we can use technology differently with, through the pandemic. But it's got to a point now where I think people are just tired of being on a Zoom call, being on a Teams call. They want to have some human interaction. And hopefully this is a pivot for us as a society to start changing that and getting back into more face-to-face and one-on-one conversations with individuals.
Yeah, I have two other quick thoughts for you. The first one is, in life, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so I hope that people realize when you say yes to using your technology, you are unfortunately saying no to spending time with your family. And that to me is, when you think about it like that, like I'm saying yes to scrolling on social media, that means I'm saying no to spending time with my kids. That to me is kind of like a gut punch of reality. But another thing that I want to share with people is there's actually a chemical difference in how we interpret being with other people. So warm human touch and people being in person releases more oxytocin and serotonin in our brains. These are the chemicals that make us feel cared for and supported and loved and connected. And when you do things online, like text message or email, it doesn't release as much or almost no serotonin or oxytocin. And so the more that we go toward digital communication and the less we go away from in-person communication, the less serotonin and oxytocin we experience as a society, and the less sense of support and love and care we feel. And that is also very bad because it's making our ability to deal with stress even worse. So technology is simultaneously increasing stress, but decreasing our ability to deal with it. And that to me is really the dynamic that's happening with the root cause of a lot of the mental health crisis in America. I truly believe that that's what's happening.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense too. And that, it is so true, right? We are energy beings. And so when we're doing it through a Zoom call, like we're doing today, it's a different feeling. How much better would it be? How much more impactful? And you've got lots of energy, Rob. So I've got, I could totally feel that through the screen. But if we were in the same room doing this, it would just be, off the charts because of, it's just that energy. We can actually feel that with people, and it's just a totally different experience, right?
Yeah, and that's the transfer of emotion between people is called limbic resonance. And I've read a bunch of studies and an entire book on this, and it is truly a human phenomenon. That's why, for instance, when you go to a concert, right, a music concert, you just experience that concert so differently in person versus watching a concert on a screen, because there's this limbic resonance with all the people in the audience, and you're a part of this group experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of everything we talked about today, and maybe there's something we have yet to touch on, what would be the one takeaway you would want our listeners to remember?
Yeah. So I really believe that the amount of love, success, and happiness in this world are infinite. And so imagine how much love, success, and happiness we could all have together if we all decided to put humans first.
Oh, I love that. What a great way to wrap things up. I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me today, Rob. We did a great job of bringing mindfulness and technology together. It's like nothing I've ever heard before. And I just think we want to say thank you so much for doing that. Now, if someone wanted to get involved with your work or involved with one of your programs, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to have people check out my website. It's humansfirst.us. And another thing that I wanted to offer the listeners today, Alan, is a free 30-minute technology mindfulness call with me, or a consultation for me to, help them out. So all people need to do to redeem that is just email me. My email address is rob@humansfirst.us. All they need to do is just mention this podcast, and I'm happy to set up a half an hour call with them so that I can help them with their technology mindfulness.
Love that. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that all that information is in the show notes so that folks, when we can reach out to you, they'll know exactly what to do. I just want to say once again, Rob, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It was an outstanding conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really grateful for everything, Alan. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.